Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier. In this presentation I'm going to focus on the Nazi Party in that fateful 6-month period that finally saw an end to Weimar democracy. Because in doing so, it shows that events could have yet taken a different turn. So it shows that nothing is inevitable in history. Yet, it still leaves us needing to explain why things turned out the way they did. Now, I ended my previous video at the point of the July 1932 election result that confirmed the Nazi Party as the leading anti-democratic party in Weimar Germany. But there is another very different perspective to take from the results. And it was one that the Nazi Party leadership took. The vote in the Reichstag elections was pretty much the same as that in the second round of the presidential election and the Prussian state elections held a few months earlier. While it could be argued that this showed their share of the vote was strong and holding firm, a positive perspective, the Nazi leadership took a more negative perspective, fearing that it had peaked. Its target had been the Social Democrat and Centre Party vote, and it had found it difficult to penetrate into those votes. The leadership's feeling was that they had gone down the parliamentary route as far as they could. Their response was that it was now time for government. As Goebbels put it, something must happen. The time for opposition is over. Now deeds. They were aware that not only their vote might have peaked, but that their hardcore members, notably the brown shirts of the SA, would grow restless if power wasn't achieved. They may have to accept a coalition, but they would only accept on their own terms, and that would be a coalition led by themselves, with Hitler as Chancellor. Now, given that they were by far the biggest party in the Reichstag, this would not be unreasonable. Negotiations between Hitler, von Papen and Hindenburg, however, didn't get anywhere. For Papen and Hindenburg, there was the issue of continued Nazi violence, while Hindenburg was also concerned that appointing Hitler as Chancellor, given that he led the biggest party, would seem to be accepting the principle of parliamentary rule, something at this point he was not keen to do. For all parties, this left difficulties. For Hitler and the Nazis, there was the danger of losing momentum. For von Papen and Hindenburg, there was the problem of gaining popular legitimacy for their plans to return Germany to authoritarian rule. So, Papen, with Hindenburg's approval, planned to dissolve the Reichstag and use the president's powers to rule by decree. However, he was outmaneuvered by Hermann Göring, who, presiding over the Reichstag's opening session in September, as was his right as the chosen representative of the biggest party, ignored Papen's attempts to move a motion to dissolve and instead accepted a communist motion of no confidence in the government. The motion of no confidence was passed by an overwhelming majority, 512 votes to 42, with 5 abstentions. The government had little alternative but to call another election for November 1932. In the election, Hitler, the man of the people, pitted himself against a cabinet of aristocratic reactionaries. But the tide had indeed turned, just as the Nazis feared it had. This was the 4th major election of the year. The party was short of funds, and the party workers were short of energy. They are overworked, Goebbels noted in his diary. Another entry commented on the lack of funds. Scarcity of money has become a chronic illness with us. We lack enough to really carry out a big campaign. It wasn't just the cost of elections that was bleeding the Nazi coffers, but the cost of thousands of party officials, and the cost of the SA, which alone cost 2.5 million marks a week. And the people themselves were simply tired of elections. The numbers attending Nazi meetings, even those in which Hitler spoke, were down. There were fewer posters, leaflets, fewer everything. Hitler's refusal to cooperate with Hindenburg and his direct attack on the government frightened off some of the bourgeois support it had worked so hard to win. Funds from big business and the world of finance consequently reduced. In the run-up to the election, the Nazis and the Communist Party participated on the side of the workers in a transport workers' strike in Berlin. The Social Democrats and even the trade unions did not support the strike. This also lost the Nazis some support amongst the bourgeoisie and also some rural voters. In an election in which the turnout was down, the Nazi vote fell by 2 million, from 13.7 million to 11.7 million, and their percentage share of the vote was also down to 33.1%. So their number of seats fell from 230 to 196. The Social Democrats lost seats again, and were now down to 121. The Communist vote increased by 750,000. They won more seats and were up to 100. This still left the Nazi Party by far the biggest party in the Reichstag, but they now had fewer seats than the Communists and Social Democrats combined. Not that they were likely to cooperate, more the pity. The Centre Party lost 5 seats and were now down to 70. The Nationalists, picking up votes from the Nazis, increased their number of seats from 37 to 52. The People's Party more modestly from 7 to 11 seats. The State Party, though, was left with only 2 seats. The most important thing to note, however, is that once more a majority of the Reichstag was totally opposed to the Constitution and determined to overthrow it. And for the right, there was the added factor that the Communist vote remained strong. What's more, because of the nature of the campaign, the Social Democrats and the Centre Party were themselves more opposed to Papen than they had been before. The Reichstag would be just as impossible to manage as the one it replaced. So, not for the first time, and not for the last time, it was Hitler's determination to see things through his way that dictated the course of history. And pause to think what this meant. Not merely the Chancellorship, but World War II and the Holocaust. So we're dealing with events of enormous significance here. Now don't forget to check out my website, History Made Easier, too, if you haven't already. But for now, let me thank you for listening and wish you the very best of luck in your studies. Cheers.